When you can't make sense of the world today,
ask Mr. Jordan to show you the way.
On the Birds and the BS.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Birds and the BS, where we encourage you to...
Oh, thank God. I don't have to respond to it. Alright, well, now that we don't have a topic for this week, how about I finally show you where the bodies are hidden?
Morning, everyone.
No! I'm gonna have to do it, aren't I? The Birds and the BS did a video on economics, and I actually have to respond to it. I mean, do I actually have to even say anything? You saw Jordan's video on gun control, right?
Government says sacrifices sometimes should be made in the name of the greater good.
And the market's a topic which even a lot of intelligent people get wrong. Good God, I'm actually kind of scared.
Welcome to the Birds and the BS, where we encourage you to actually take the advice you give your children.
Okay, so it's not a kids' show. It's a show which was directed and written as if the target audience were children ages 3 to 5, but the subject matter is political commentary directed towards adults who support expanding government influence over society. I don't think I could have demonstrated how pathetic the authoritarian mentality was better if I tried. Thanks, Jordan.
Today's letter comes from Bill in Billings.
Are these supposed to be real letters sent from real people, but they're faked because no one actually watches this show unironically? Or are these supposed to be badly written jokes only here because the artistically bankrupt morons writing the script think that it's funny and boosts the entertainment value? If it's the former, you should stop giving these fake people names that sound so similar to the locations that they're supposedly from. If it's the latter, you're even more incompetent than if it were the former. I mean, come on, Jordan. We know that you only have everything that you do because Daddy is a multi-billionaire real estate mogul, but at least put a little bit of effort into it.
Dear Mr. Jordan, after our conference in Vegas, my boss asked me why there was a charge from a strip club on my company card. I told her I thought it was just a club on the strip.
Ha ha!
And now I'm back in the mailroom. Why do I get in trouble for bullshitting, but Trump gets away with it all the time? Bill, you are not alone. This makes zero sense to almost all of us.
You're really making me side with Donald Trump again, even though dishonest mainstream media coverage is not a partisan political issue. I really have to point out that these mainstream media outlets are subsidized by the government, or that there exists an unclassified CIA document which explains that the government has CIA agents posing as journalists and creating government-approved propaganda to pass off as news stories, and it gave a list of names, some of which are still working in the media today. That's not even to mention the prominent journalists like Anderson Cooper who've admitted to working for the CIA that Operation Mockingbird did not explicitly mention as shills. And it's not even that complicated. All you have to do is look up the names of these mainstream media outlets on YouTube to find hundreds upon thousands of videos highlighting times where they've lied or cut the satellite feed on people they were interviewing who were spreading a narrative they didn't want people to hear. At this point, to say that the mainstream media is dishonest and agenda-driven is a completely uncontroversial statement of fact.
But we're joined today by someone who can explain, Master Pointillist Mandy Patinkin. What are you working on there, Mandy? Mandy?
Oh, sorry, Jordan. Just putting final touches on my latest masterpiece. I'm finishing the fact.
Your what?
Look, I made a fact.
Trickle-down economics is not actually a phrase used in any economic literature because it's not actually an argument or phrase that economists use to support their ideas. It's a straw-man argument used to describe any economic concept which is incompatible with demand-side government policies. Which is incredibly ironic because Keynesians, the people who advocate for demand-side economic theory, advocate for increasing the tax rate since according to Keynesians, people saving money is hoarding funding resources which could otherwise be used to stimulate interest rates. In other words, demand-side economists literally advocate for institutionalizing policies that make it more difficult for wage earners to make more money and build a financial future for themselves, specifically to benefit the heads of government investment banks. Even better, it was initially a term that was coined by Will Rogers when campaigning for FDR's first term to describe his economic policy and using government spending to stimulate the economy, specifically by increasing the income tax. In other words, this is yet another example of leftist demagogues actually demonstrating some of their economic policies in the real world. Then, after their little experiment fails to give them the results that they wanted, they attempt to revise history or change the meaning of their phrase in order to associate it with the ideas of their ideological opponents, all while pretending that their ideas were never tested and have never failed and were never refuted and are still fresh and relevant.
Where there never was a fact.
That's not a fact. We've seen time and again that cutting taxes on the wealthy does not benefit anyone else.
Where have you seen that? Show me specifically one example of a time where that's happened. Since most people arguing from your position love to cite the official economic policy from the state of Kansas of 2013 to 2017, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and assume that if I were to ask you, you'd respond by citing this example. You're making two errors by doing so. One, you're ignoring all of the regulations which increase the cost of production, such as minimum wage laws or inspection periods, which make it more costly for employers to hire laborers. Two, the Kansas tax cut was a 24% cut on state tax. That's ignoring all of the other taxes people in Kansas still have to pay, which federal taxes were increasing in this period of time. 3. A metric which mainstream figures used in order to claim that this was a failure is the fact that the amount that the government had to spend in its budget decreased in this period of time by around $1 billion. And they mentioned this because of another common straw man argument used by Keynesians to attack their opponents' ideas, which is by claiming that demand-side critics are arguing that tax cuts will lead to the government having more money in its budget, which is incredibly stupid and disingenuous, since people who disagree with them do so because they don't believe government spending stimulates the economy and that private actors having more of their own money would be better for economic growth. This straw man Keynesians make is also a rather underhanded way to imply without evidence that economic growth comes from government revenue. For one thing, all you need to do is actually look at economic growth and its relation to the income tax rate to see that there's no correlation between higher taxes on the upper income brackets and economic growth. Also, we can demonstrate that once the tax rate is above 10%, revenues remain a consistent percent of GDP. This is because of something known as the Laffer curve, or to put it simply, when the tax rate is raised above a certain rate, the state will stop making as much revenue because less people will be able to afford business, resulting in businesses shutting down or more than likely going to a different country with a lower tax rate, and people operating in the agora to avoid the state altogether.
Jordan, of course it does. If the climate's changing, facts just need rearranging.
The irony being that NASA has been known to revise data in order to show that the climate is getting warmer at a faster rate. Meanwhile, most of the so-called climate change deniers aren't actually denying that climate change happens, only pointing out various problems with your arguments, like how the so-called hockey stick graph only accounts for the last 100 to 200 years, when this is what global climate change looks like if you go back 10,000 years. Or how the claims that proponents use to support the narrative of anthropogenic climate change openly contradict one another, like how it's causing autumn leaves to lose their bright colors and simultaneously causing them to become more colorful, how the oceans are losing their salt content and also are becoming more saline, or, and perhaps the funniest of all, global warming is to blame for colder winter trends. With arguments this weak, it's no wonder that they resort to calling for people who disagree with them to be arrested. 'Cause that's the scientific position, right? Making claims so broad that literally anything that happens could be used to prove your theory, to the point where your arguments become self-contradictory and untestable, presenting data charts which are heavily misrepresented by selectively omitting scale, or inexplicably raising the y-axis, the whole 9 yards of dishonest tactics used by pseudoscientists to misrepresent data, or, in some cases, resorting to outright fucking lying about the data you collected. Then when people call you out on your bullshit, you say that they should be thrown in jail. So scientific, am I right?
Refugees are not committing crime, but we can still frame them every time.
Oh, so that's what we're doing now. You're just not even trying to make arguments, you're simply saying things that conform to your political views even though they openly contradict observable reality. You know, the travel warnings to areas that have majority refugee populations in Europe, or how crime is getting so bad in European countries because of the welfare statism and legal privileges that their governments keep giving to refugees, that most of their governments aren't even keeping records on refugee crime stats anymore.
Water's unsafe without regulation. Tell them it's fine, that's truth gradation.
Yeah, it was pretty awful when the EPA polluted the shit out of the Colorado River, or any time that state-managed economies like the USSR or China have control over water sources. Oh, wait. Those were all caused by regulation and state management. Seems like the government and the environment have a very tenuous relationship. That's because the government has absolutely no incentive tied to preserving the environment, where with private actors they're incentivized to keep their property values high and a high quality of living for themselves, and producers have the direct incentive to preserve the environment on their property so that they can maintain a steady source of income. Also, there's the fact that if private actors pollute the environment and it damages someone else's land, that's an act of aggression since they're destroying someone else's property, where if the government does it, they could simply choose not to hold themselves liable.
Then step back and see your creation. And when there's a base you need to deceive, just pull that pen from your sleeve and conceive. Then right before your eyes they'll believe. Yes, bullshitting is an art, you see, not as easy as just ABD.
Also, it seems like this episode is trying to outdo the previous one in how fucking awful it is, because this time, even from an artistic standpoint, it's just very badly made. You have a singer who can't sing trying to vocalize in an operatic singing style, which is one of the most difficult forms of vocalizing, with a song that was clearly not written to work with an operatic singer. The music in the background is very awkward, and the lyrics are written in a pathetically basic A-B rhyme scheme.
It's a fine, fine job if you're willing. Unlike fine art, it'll make you a killing. If you've led with confusion, you can draw that conclusion. Bullshitting is an art.
Yet another straw man argument. There are various different reasons why people disagree with welfare programs. They decrease productivity, they increase the crime rate, they create a disincentive for people to seek employment, it's unethical and really kinda unjustifiable to steal from productive people and redistribute it to people who've contributed little to nothing, and politicians use welfare programs as a way to make people dependent on the government. But nobody argues against welfare statism because welfare is just for lazy people.
Spinning shit into gold takes a steady hand. To go on TV and take the fakest stand. To look truth in the eye with an unfazed lie.
Oh, so the media does lie, it's just that everyone you disagree with are the liars. Even when both of you are making the exact same claims, they somehow are still liars and you aren't.
What?
Badum.